Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Hi guys, welcome back to our class. So today we are going to look at chapter 5 of your history book. And this chapter is about the Roman Empire, which was an empire that was established across 3 continents. So Roman Empire, an empire across 3 continents. Alright? Now if you remember from our introduction class, right, we learned little bit about the Roman Empire, its rivalries, its conflicts with the Germanic tribes and its enemies, right? So in this chapter, we'll look in very detail, okay, about the Roman Empire, its rulers, its society, its culture, etc. Okay, so let us begin. Now, in the introduction itself, we had learned little bit about the 2 important empires in Europe during the time of our study. So those were Rome, one was centered around Rome, and the other that was centered around Iran. Okay, so these were the 2 important empires. 2 important empires in Europe. Okay, and these 2 empires ruled over most of Europe, okay, North Africa and the Middle East between the period of the birth of Christ down to 630 AD, okay. So it ruled for about 700 years, okay. Now these empires, you'll see that they extended over 3 continents. Europe, Asia, Africa. Okay, so 3 continents, they extended their control and authority. Alright. Now we already know the Romans and the Iranians, the Roman Empire and the Arab Empire, they were enemies to each other. They were rivals, okay? So because of that, they fought against each other for the most of the period of their existence. So as long as they existed, they fought with each other constantly, okay? These empires, both the Roman Empire and the Arab Empire, they were situated next to each other. Okay, they were not far away from each other, but they were situated next to each other in an adjacent manner. Okay, they were only separated by a strip of land that ran along the river Euphrates. Okay, so only a small strip of land divided or demarcated or separated these 2 empires. Okay, so in this chapter, we will look at the history of Roman Empire and we'll try to have an idea, we'll try to get an idea about the rival empire, the Arab Empire, that is the Iranian or the Arab Empire. Alright, so let us begin. So first we'll look at the Roman Empire. Alright, so it is believed that there was a small settlement known as Rome. Okay, and this Rome, the settlement in Rome was established by twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, okay, on the left bank of river Tiber, in the middle of the 8th century before Christ. So this means 800 BC. Alright, so there's a belief that Roman Empire started with a small establishment of a settlement, okay, by the river Tiber, by twin brothers whose name was Romulus and Remus in 800 BC. Now, scholars believe that there's another belief which is by scholars. They believe that in the early 8th century BC, in the early part of 800 BC, alright, the occupants of small Latin settlements in the hills in the Tiber Valley united and established a common meeting place called the Forum, around which the city of Rome was set up. So scholars believe that a Latin settlement was set up in the hills, okay, in the Tiber Valley, and they established a common meeting place for all the people living there, and that was called the Forum. And this later this later became the city of Rome. Okay, this led to the development or the foundation of the city of Rome, and that is how Rome came into existence. Okay. Now, Rome, if you look at it, it is situated at a very convenient place. Okay, it's situated at a very nice place, a strategic place, and it is protected by hills. Okay, it is placed on the crossing on the river, by the river, so you can cross the river easily. And not only that, it has access to the river, but it also is surrounded by hills and marshes. Okay, so because of that, Rome, the city of Rome, occupied a strategic position. Okay, it was located and situated in a very strategic position, in a position which was very good for the people living in that area. They would not be easily attacked by the others because it was surrounded by hills, it was surrounded by marshes, right? And if it had to travel by water to other places, it had access to the river as well. Okay, so it was located in a very strategic position. Okay, so gradually over the period of time, slowly merchants and craftsmen began to settle in this city. They began to move into the city and do their work. Okay. The Romans occupied the neighboring towns, and over the period of time, the people living in Rome, they began to occupy the neighboring towns. They began to expand their city. Okay, and with that expansion, slowly, they became bigger and bigger. Okay. Now, initially, in the beginning, the Romans, they were ruled by a king. Okay, so a king was the ruler of all the Romans. But in 509 BC, the Romans drove the king out of Rome and abolished monarchy. So in 500 BC, the people drove out the king of Rome, and they also got rid of monarchy. Monarchy is the system where a ruler, a king, becomes the head of the area, the territory, okay, or the people. And after getting rid of the monarchy or the king, they established a republic. A republic, as I said in the last class, is a system of government where people elect their leader. They select their leader. Okay? And so the people in Rome developed a sort of democratic government, okay, where the people had the right to select the person who would be their ruler. Okay? But despite this, the real power of control over the people and the territory lay within a small body of people called the Senate. Okay. Now this Senate was a body. The Senate was formed by a group of people, and these people came from aristocratic families. They came from very rich and wealthy and powerful families. Okay. So they were part of the nobility. They were nobles. Now the common people, as you can see, had no control over the government. It was said that the people could elect their ruler, their leader, but it was the Senate which did almost all the ruling and controlling and also selection of the ruler. Okay, so the common people had no role to play in the government. The main role was played by the Senate, which was a group of influential, wealthy aristocrat people. Okay. Now the Romans conquered Italy and the whole of Mediterranean region. So over time the Romans, they kept on expanding and they conquered the whole of Italy and also the Mediterranean region. Okay. And over time, Rome became one of the mightiest empires, okay? And one of the mightiest rulers of Rome was Julius Caesar, okay? And he became the undisputed, one of the greatest ruler of the Roman Empire in 37 BC, okay? Now, we have learned that Rome was a republic, right? But despite this republic nature of government, over time it became it became an empire with one ruler or one emperor as the head or the king or the ruler of the entire empire. Okay, so it was not a republic. It was not a republic. It was an empire with a ruler, with one ruler, with an emperor. Okay. Now, when we look at the Roman Empire, we can divide it into two phases. Okay, so we can understand the Roman Empire by dividing it into two phases. The first phase is called the early phase, and the second phase is called the late phase. Okay, and they are divided by a period. Okay, which is the 3rd century or 300 AD. Alright. In other words, the whole period down to the main part of the 3rd century AD is called the early empire, and the period after that is called the late empire. So the period until 300 AD is called the early Roman Empire, and the period after 300 AD is called the late empire or late Roman Empire. Okay. So now let's look at the early empire. In 27 BC, the Senate of the Republic conferred upon Octavian, a former companion of Julius Caesar, the titles of Augustus, Imperator, and Principate, symbolizing the transformation of Rome from republic to an empire. Now, in 27 BC, what happened was the Senate, right? The Senate, you know who Senate are, the important people in the empire, the body, the very significant body of the empire, okay, who came from the nobility. Now, the Senate, it made Octavian. Octavian was the successor of Julius Caesar. So Octavian was given the title of Augustus, Imperator, and Principate by the Senate in 27 BC. So by giving him titles like this, the Senate was trying to say that now Rome was no longer a republic, but now Rome was an empire with its emperor who was Octavian. And he was Augustus, Imperator, and Principate of the Empire of Rome. Okay. Now, although Octavian was actually the emperor, but he preferred the republican title of first citizen. Okay. So the republican title of the leader of the people was first citizen. So the ruler was called first citizen and not the emperor. But Octavian in practice was the emperor, but he preferred the title of first citizen. Okay. He was the real ruler of the empire, but he kept alive the fiction that he was actually only a leading citizen. He was the actual emperor and ruler of the empire, but he said that he was actually only a leader among the citizens, the leading citizen. Okay. Now let us look at the reign of Augustus, Octavian. Alright. Augustus brought the Pax Romana, okay, to the Romans and to the world. His achievements may be described as under. Now, Augustus brought about many changes during his reign. Okay, he brought peace. He brought peace in the empire. Okay, which stopped or which prevented the empire to keep on constantly fighting with its rivals and keep on constantly invading its enemies. Okay, now let us see what Augustus was like. Now Augustus, although he was conferred the title of the emperor, he did not want to become an absolute ruler. He did not want to become a despot, okay? A ruler who had absolute authority and control over everything, okay? Why? Because he respected the Senate. Okay, the Senate, the body of aristocrats. So they had controlled Rome. They had been influential to the administration and government of Rome. So Augustus respected the Senate, and he did not want to become the overall controller and authoritarian of the entire Senate and the administration of the whole of the empire. Okay, the Senate had existed for many centuries, and it had played important role in the administration of Rome and its affairs. It had composed, like I said, of the aristocrats, the wealthiest families, the most influential and strong families in Rome. All right. Now, one of the things that Octavian or Augustus did was reorganize the army. Now, army was an important institution of the empire. All right. Unlike the army of its rival, the Iranian Empire, we know, was the enemy of the Roman Empire, right? There, the army or the soldiers were forcibly recruited. They were forced to recruit themselves. But in the Roman Empire, the armies were professional soldiers, okay? And they were put to a minimum service of 25 years. So once they were recruited, they were allowed to serve for a minimum of 25 years. They were not just chucked out anytime, alright? And they were paid. Alright, so the fact that the soldiers in the Roman army were paid by the emperor was the special feature of the army itself. In the other empires, the army was not paid, okay? They enjoyed other benefits, but they were not paid regularly. All right. Now, by the 4th century, the army of the Roman Empire had become the largest organized body in the whole of empire. Okay. Now, Augustus or the emperor recruited the army from Roman citizens, from the common citizens, okay, and the officers came from the aristocratic classes, okay. So the soldiers came from the common people, and the officers were recruited from the aristocratic or the wealthier classes. Okay, the army stood guard at all frontiers and within all troubled areas in the empire. So the armies were stationed. The armies were stationed at the frontiers, the border areas of the territory, and it was also made to stay at troubled areas where people would fight, where the people would challenge the officers and the emperor. In those areas, the armies were also sent. Okay, and Augustus or the emperor kept a small group of army which were like bodyguard, okay, for himself, for the protection of himself, and this was called the Praetorian Guard. Okay. Now, Augustus also added a navy in the military force. Okay, so he also set up a naval force. All right. Now, the military affairs, everything that had to do with the military, the army and the navy, that was exclusively controlled by Augustus himself or the emperor himself. Okay. Now, Augustus knew that he had to make sure that his army or soldier or the military force was loyal to him, okay, was loyal to their new profession, okay, was loyal to their service. Now, how did he make sure that the loyalty of the armies, the loyalty of the soldiers and his military forces remained with him? Okay, he made them take personal oath of loyalty. Okay, so promises had to be made to the emperor. Okay, and he made sure that the emperor himself, he, Augustus, was the paymaster. Okay, meaning that he would pay the military servicemen, okay, to all the soldiers, to all the officers himself, all right, on time. So this would ensure that the soldiers, that the military service people did not leave the job or did not switch the loyalty to others, and the loyalty remained and continued to remain with him. Okay, in short, he was their patron. So what it means was he paid the soldiers, he made sure that they remained with him because he paid them. So he was a patron of this military service people. Okay. Now the military commanders in his military force came from the aristocrats, came from his own family. Okay, so that way he had strong and loyal military commanders. Okay. He kept his army, the military force, busy in campaigns in Spain, in the Alpine regions, along with the Danube and Rhine rivers, across the Rhine River in Germany, and numerous small-scale actions all along the empire's frontiers. So these military troops were engaged in fighting the enemies, in invading the neighbors in the northern part of Europe, as well as in the other parts across the frontier of the Roman Empire. Okay, and when the military service people, when the military force did not have to be sent for fighting, for war, for battles, then they were engaged. They were engaged in helping settle some political upheavals. Okay, so if there were no wars to be fought, if there were no battles happening, then these forces were sent to areas where there was some chaos, where there were no peace. Okay, within the empire. So there the force would go, make sure law and order was maintained. All right. Now, apart from military reorganization, Augustus also introduced administrative reforms. Okay. Now, he reformed or brought changes to the administration of the Roman Empire in many ways. Okay, in domestic sphere, though the Senate had moved from being the chief organ of the state to a very subordinate position and a sort of assembly of administrators at the disposal of Augustus. Now, what he did was he removed the Senate. Now, Senate was a very important body of aristocrats, right, in Roman Empire. Now, it was one of the chief organ of the empire, one of the chief important group or important component of the empire or its administration. Now, from how important it was, how important body it was moved to a subordinate position. Okay, from a very, very important position, it was brought down to less important position. Okay, so now it became just an assembly of administrators. It became just a group of officials or officers or administrators, okay, who helped the emperor in looking after the empire. All right. He did not further determine the position of Senate, and after that he did not go to decrease the position of the Senate. All right, he just made it little less important than it was before, but that was it. All right. Now, apart from that, he created new positions, okay, and for that he appointed new officers, and these officers were curators of aqueducts, aqueducts, or of the public works and prefectures of the cities. Now, these newly appointed officers were to head the new positions or new areas that he introduced, like as guardians of aqueducts. Okay, these were projects, public work projects. Okay, say for example, building bridges, building drains for carrying water. Okay, or looking after the cities, the head of the cities, okay, magistrate of the cities. So these positions were filled by the newly appointed, newly selected senators or officers or ministers by Augustus. Okay. Now, despite how he moved the Senate to a subordinate position, to less important position than before, but throughout his rule, Augustus consulted the Senate, consulted these aristocrat ministers, and he treated the Senate with respect. Okay, he did not disrespect them. Now, apart from this, Augustus also brought or recruited or appointed officers or administrators from non-senatorial section of the city. Now he appointed officers not only from the wealthy and rich and influential families of Rome, but he also appointed administrators and ministers from other families who were less wealthy or less influential in Rome. Okay. The thrust of Augustus' administrative reform was to create permanent standing offices headed by long-term appointments in place of republican system, which preferred occasional and rotating appointments. So the main aim of Augustus was to make sure that the positions, the jobs, the offices that he was creating, the recruitment the appointment of administrators, officials, nobles that he was doing, he wanted to make sure that these were long-term appointments. These were not changed frequently. Okay, so he wanted to make a permanent standing offices. All right. Now, of course, the empire benefited enormously from Augustus' reforms, from Augustus' reorganization of army and administrative reforms. Okay, so he not only brought peace. One of the main important contribution was that Augustus made sure that peace was maintained in the empire. Okay, but he also established good government. Okay, he brought good government. Now, Augustus created a centralized system of courts, meaning now the courts which provided justice to people, they were under his supervision, they were under his control, under his authority. Okay, so now he delivered justice to the people. Okay, he also assumed direct control over the provincial governors. He also controlled the provincial governors and he punished them in case of corruption, in case of extortion of heavy taxes, unwanted, unnecessary, or more taxes than what it should be. Okay. Now, tax collection was very important to the Roman Empire. Okay, and Augustus made tax collection a state function. It was the responsibility of the state, the government, to collect the tax. Okay, now taxes were collected efficiently. All right, and new import taxes were also introduced. Okay, to keep the expenses down, new foreign conquests were undertaken. All right, so what we understand is that Augustus tried to bring an overall a good government, okay, which was beneficial for him, for the people, as well as the nobility or the ministers and officers under him. Okay, now let us look at art and architecture under Augustus. Now, Augustus also patronized arts. Okay, he also encouraged and supported the production of arts. Okay, now he established an extensive program for the promotion of art and architecture. All right, and he is known by his famous quote, and which is, "I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble." So you can see here he says he found Rome as a city of brick, but when he left Rome after his rule ended, it was a city of marble. So you can understand how much he supported, encouraged, and patronized art and architecture, that it changed the landscape of the city. Okay. Now, some of the major important monuments that he built in the city were his Forum, okay, the Ara Pacis Augustae, the Stagnum and Euripus, the Pantheon, and the Setta Julia. Okay. Now, the architecture that he built was a mixture of conservatism, okay, and innovation, and it had influence of the Greek. Okay, so these had Greek influence, and it was a mixture of two styles. One was conservatism and the other was innovation. Okay. Now, in literature also, Augustus was very eager, and he supported and he promoted literature. Okay. Some of the famous and influential writers during his period were Virgil, Horace, Ovid, uh, Tibullus, Livy. Okay, so these people, they wrote both poetry, poems, as well as prose, stories, novels. Okay, Virgil in particular wrote a new national epic for the Romans in Aeneid. Okay, Virgil, one of the writers during his period, wrote the national epic for the Romans, and that was called Aeneid. Okay, another famous literary patron of this period was C. Maecenas. Okay, he was a close associate, or he was close, very close, he had close relationship with Augustus. Alright. Now, the Augustus reign, the Emperor Augustus reign, is very famous for the peace that it ushered after decades of internal strife and centuries of military campaigns. Like I said before, I had briefly mentioned that Augustus is remembered for bringing peace in the empire. There used to be a lot of fights, lot of conflicts, lot of rivalries. But when Augustus came to rule the Roman Empire, he made sure that peace was maintained. So not many military campaigns were fought or led. Okay, and there were no major wars that were fought during his period. Okay, the only major campaign of expansion in this early empire was Trajan's fruitless occupation of territory across Euphrates in the years 113 to 117 CE or AD, abandoned by his successors. So the only incident or event of military campaign was Trajan's occupation of territory across Euphrates, but this campaign was also unsuccessful. Okay. In later years, Augustus withdrew more and more from public eye. Although he continued to transact public business, he was getting older. In any case, Tiberius had been installed as its successor by 13 AD and was virtually the emperor already. Okay. So, in the later years, towards the end of Augustus' reign, he withdrew from the public eye. He did not take part in activities, and he was not seen in the public much. Okay, he withdrew from public eye, and he also withdrew himself from the administrative businesses and affairs. All right. Now, when he got older, his successor Tiberius was appointed as the next ruler. Okay, and he became the emperor by 13 AD. All right.